And you talked about the secondary. I know that the corner position is well fortified, although maybe some depth concerns are just trying to figure out maybe some depth pieces and if some guys can play. So we'll start there on the defense.
Well, it's really just about its youth, its young depth, right? There's a lot of talent. You've got Benjamin Morrison coming back, who's a preseason All-American. Christian Gray, Jaden Mickey both played a lot last year. Christian Gray's a former top 100 recruit who I thought very highly of. Notre Dame beat out Ohio State and LSU to land him. Very, very talented player out of St. Louis. There was a time last year, Mark, and you know how good Notre Dame's corners were last year, but there was a time last year in the Pitt game, for example. Now, keep in mind, Pitt had a guy get drafted this year, and their quarterbacks weren't very good, but their receivers were pretty decent. And Benjamin Morrison didn't play. He had a hamstring injury, so he didn't play. And then Cam Hart got knocked out, I think, first quarter with an elbow injury. And if you watched the rest of the game, if you didn't know and they didn't tell you that those guys were out, you wouldn't have noticed. I mean, Jaden Mickey had a pick 6 in that game. Christian Gray had a crazy one-handed interception that game. And you're just like, there aren't a lot of teams that can lose their 2 starting corners and the other team can't do anything about it. They can't take advantage of it all. Now, behind them, you've got a lot of, again, it's about youth. Leonard Moore's a very talented true freshman from Texas, but, he's kind of now battling for that number 4 job with Chance Tucker. The one thing they do have is they landed Rod Hurd out of Northwestern. They're planning on playing him at safety. He's a guy that could play nickel or corner in a pinch. He actually spent some time at corner at Northwestern. He was their nickel last year, had over 80 tackles. They're recruiting him to play that boundary safety position. So they do have a couple things they could do if they get into some problems, but numbers-wise, they should be good. It's just young. And, Mark, you don't ever want to be in a situation in football where I don't mind playing young players. I mean, I still remember watching a Clemson team in 2018 with a true freshman quarterback, a true sophomore running back, a true sophomore leading receiver, a true freshman as their number 2 receiver, go out there and win a national championship and beat Notre Dame along the way. But what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you have to play young guys. Play them if they earn it, but you don't want to have to play them. And unfortunately, because of, just kind of how things have gone at Notre Dame in the past, they are relying on some young guys that have to step up this year if they're going to reach their full potential at that position. The good news is those guys have played a lot of football.
So it's my impression, again, before taking the deep dive, and you're the start of it for me, and then I'll go through all the various depth charts and so forth, is that this Notre Dame defense, if it reaches its reasonable potential, it's going to be as good as just about anybody in the country.
Yeah, I mean, they were there last year. I mean, Notre Dame was a top 10 defense last season, and they were top 5. It was Notre Dame and Michigan and Iowa were basically top 5 in about every single passing category. The disadvantage Notre Dame had is they didn't have to play a whole schedule against the Big Ten, so they didn't get to pad some of their stats against some of those Big Ten passing teams, I say jokingly. But no, they should be, right? I mean, the question's going to be this, Mark. What we're going to find out this year is this. For a long time, you know how it went at Notre Dame. They would have great players. They would have lots of guys in the NFL. I mean, you see the list every year. Notre Dame's always in like top 6 or 7 of producing NFL players. There's always a big gap between them and like Alabama and Ohio State, but they're always in that top 5 or 6. The problem is Notre Dame would lose a really good player, and they hadn't recruited and or developed well enough to where they were going to be able to reload. They had to kind of rebuild at different times. Well, the best teams are reloading. Georgia loses a guy, they replace him with somebody just as good, just younger. Well, we're going to find out now if Notre Dame is in that position on defense. Okay, you lose J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau, a 5th and a 3rd round draft pick, respectively. You lose Cam Hart, who gets drafted in the 5th round. I think he should have been drafted higher. I think he was a better player than that. You lose DJ Brown, who's a 6-year senior and a multi-year starter, and you say, okay, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be able to handle that? And we'll find out. You replace J.D. Bertrand, who is a really good football player, with a former top 100 recruit. You move Jack Kaiser inside. You replace him at Rover with a former top 100 recruit. You lose a guy like DJ Brown, and you replace him with Rod Hurd out of the transfer portal and a Don Schuler, who was a top 150 recruit. So you lose a guy like Cam Hart, and you replace him with a guy like Christian Gray, who's a top 50 to 100 recruit. So we're going to find out if Notre Dame's evaluations are as good as the recruiting rankings show, which is always a conversation. I tend to use it in this example because it actually goes with what I think of these players as recruits. So I'm going to use it to back my point. But we're going to find out if Notre Dame is in reload mode or if they're in rebuild mode. And so that's what's going to tell me if this coaching staff has really been able to build the program the way they need to, which is you lose players, so what? You replace them and you're just as good because other guys are better, and these guys are able to do enough. And we're going to find out if Drake Bowen can be that guy at linebacker. We're going to find out if RJ Oben and Josh Burnham and Bryce Young can give you the production that Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Nano Safa-Mensah gave. We're going to find out if Rod Hurd and Don Schuler can be as good, I actually think better than what you had last year with DJ Brown, who's graduated, and Ramon Henderson, who went in the portal and went to UCLA. So there's actually a chance I think they could be better than last year. It's just going to come down to can they eliminate the mistakes that come up the middle when you have young linebackers and young safeties? That's going to be the question mark for me.